few months later you bring it back and that's it. But extensive farming in the tropics is the most damaging activity in tropical rainforests, and it's not even one of the most productive activities. So we must think how we could minimize the impact of these productive activities. There's people who are doing entrepreneurial agriculture in the tropics, taking advantage of these conditions. We have a market in Mexico that's around $100,000 a year. And now we have companies that are producing rubber in the tropic. They start poking the tree and they do that for 20 or 25 years. And then that's a wood, that's a tree that can use to wood. So they can produce ornaments under the tropics. So let's think about alternatives other than extensive livestock that has a very high impact on the environment. It's very comfortable to carry out, but it's not very profitable either. Here are some pictures on where the basin is and its limits. This is in Chiapas. And we're carrying out the same thing in Michoacán. We locate the population because all this land in the country is owned by someone, and we cannot do these activities if we're not endorsed by someone. We have to know what kind of land they have, what kind of interests they have, and to settle an agreement. These are pictures of the place we're working in. These are the components of the biophysical characteristics. The use of the land specified, and using all these technologies we can identify what are the conditions of the land use. This is a picture of one of the mudslides and the slopes, because rainfall causes heavy erosion in this area. We have elevation topography figures, the socioeconomical status on the population. And once the population is duly identified, their economical conditions, their educational level, then we can start working with them in their own plots. We also work in the currents, where we use technologies to slow down the water, which causes less problems in the lower areas. They do not drag as much soil, and then we contain the soil and the vegetation starts growing back. It has a number of benefits, but it's very expensive considering the amount of land we need to cover. So I want to highlight the importance of keeping your eye on basins. And we're all immersed in what? In a basin, basically. We can have technologies that range from the appropriate use of water with high-frequency irrigation systems, but we can also have greenhouse production or apiculture, different activities where we reuse water, where we lower the impact on the environment. These are general bases that we should all work with, lowering this impact of these productive activities. We can do beekeeping and using different technologies for production. As I was saying, irrigation system has the highest impact because water is used for agriculture, and this represents a lot of losses due to its misuse. And we must invest in producing that. Producers must invest in this activity. As far as CONAGUA and Zagarpa is concerned, they have new proposals for high efficiency irrigation. I believe these technologies have a very high importance not only on the efficient use of water but on the market. How can we sell our products? What role is this playing? How can we invest in technology to give it a better use?
Algunos tipos de riego que podemos usar, ¿no? Eso los tenemos en la universidad, pero muestra, de hecho, ahí usan toda la confianza, la Comisión Nacional del Agua de muchos técnicos y productores poder capacitarlos. Y bueno, yo solamente quise llamar la atención sobre estos aspectos que me parecen importantes.
I would like to call your attention to this important fact, which is hand managing regional development based on networks, where we can be able to properly assess the external factors on a land's population, making special emphasis on droughts, even if there are other phenomena, for example, in the northeast. And as a country, we should have strategies on how to mitigate this external factors such as snow and drought. I was the other time I proposed with the director of Sagarpa I proposed to create the National System of Innovators, where we would not give credit for how many articles were published and whether they were published or not, or how many congresses did he assist, but by how much did that specific product increase the profit of someone, how much did a person earn due to its innovation. And to have a recognition for that. And not neglecting the other parts, but we should really reward prizes where investigators research for new technology and apply it to ensure a better impact. Mexico has very little resources used into investigation. They have more resources on research, however, not on application. And I think we should all create the National Innovator System, where a certain farmer will give me a letter saying how his business was transformed through my product, how his profitability increased. Well, this is just to see if we all worked, and I would like to run this idea by you and these points of view, and hopefully we can all be engaged in this regard. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to discuss this very interesting aspects of water and development and all the aspects that Mexico has to consider that are of an incredibly numerous nature. And we're always looking for a way to keep this profitability. As they said when I was introduced, I focus on the subject of water. I'm an agronomist engineer, so I feel very comfortable. I've been working on projects in terms of water management before the matters set before us by global warming. I'm going to talk about this vision that we have on the challenges that Mexico face in the rural area, the link between water and climate change, the implications on the social point of view that you were debating a minute ago, vulnerability of water here in Mexico, and the perspectives that are presented for watering, for the use of water with agricultural purposes, and some recommendations that I think might be useful to you. So, basically, I do not have an in-depth knowledge of your situation. I'm a foreigner, but as I perceive, you're going through a very interesting stage in the NAFTA. You have gone from the transition stage to a more consolidation stage. On the other hand, you have been facing the consequences of the global food crisis and the price increase that could benefit some other sectors, but it also increases the price of the raw material. This happened 2008. It sort of rested in 2009, but now it's back. The prices are high again, and they would appear to remain so or keep rising. And that's another element for the scenario that you have in front of you. And another aspect is the sustainable use of natural resources, which you had in the last debate. There is more and more concern each time of what's going to happen with these resources, how they can be exploited, and especially special concern in water. And and we have to agree on policies and on instruments that can protect and guarantee the sustainability and also the maintaining of our scenarios in extreme scenarios, in extreme circumstances. We also have as elements of discussion and analysis some aspects of the Mexican system that are especially relevant now that we have the climate change and the increase in prices, which is that the expenses of the agricultural sector has been long compromised with certain ideas or practices by crops or by locations. And as we know, once these programs are launched, it's very hard to change them because certain interests and certain compromises are created, which eliminates little by little the main capacity to change things. And we have also assistance to the rural media. Por favor, es que me canso. And to protect the environment. And we have a typical case such as the pumping tariffs and when we have abundant groundwater, but now when we have this overexploited aquifers, we're facing this politics that may have a negative implication in the environment. We also have the need to strengthen the agricultural resources with the water management resources. We have CONAGUA, we have other resources, and these are great institutions and work groups that have the effort. We have to make an effort to work this as a community. In relation to agricultural risks, there are some very interesting data
that was suffered with the weather change issue. And the plans that are going to be posed have to give flexibility so the growers could take local decisions in every sector. Every region would have a specific plan. And these rural plans necessarily would have to overuse the resources and trying to orient production in the framework of the policies of the Mexican government has outlined when we got the climate change strategy issued. So there is an amount of policies that are reflected on the budget to which you, as sector operators, should pay special attention because everything is being decided according to those agreed guidelines. When we're talking about climate change, there are very classical things that we have to take into account: the evolution of temperature, for instance, the global temperature, and also the increase of carbon content. In 1880, we began measuring temperature, and there is a very consistent increase. The experts in climate are still debating on this because there are evident things about the temperature increase, but there is much debate on the consequence of this sort of phenomena. For instance, I am coming from Sonora in the northern Mexico. We are planning about the water planning, and that there is an increased temperature would involve change in the rainfall, and the everything in terms of the rivers are not showing any climate change consequence. Are happening, many things are happening, but they are not consistent to our suppositions. This would impact water, and water impacts the environment. This is both ways. The underground water implies reductions in the rainfalls, affectations in the rainfall patterns. The loads change, and the possibilities of water extraction change. And in the case of shallow water in this moment, there is a difference perceived in the land and the possibilities of extraction. And in general terms, and since we have a topographic difference that, and in our territory, since we have any sort of climates, talking about the north and the south, we clearly have an increase in the temperature. And maybe I didn't mention about decrease in temperature. Maybe we will have the same amount of rainfall, but the events will be less, and that would also affect temperatures. We would have warmer nights, affecting many cultivations that are very sensitive to these changes. The economic point, it goes to disasters. Besides the productive piece, it is evident that there has been a consistent growth in the number of disasters related to climate, like droughts. A typical event would be floods because of an excess of water, and 18% of the tracked events between 1979 and 2000 are caused by an excess of water. And we also have all sort of scenarios in the coasts where we have affectations to the mangroves, and due to the sea level and frequency of hurricanes in mountain areas where we have very diverse coast zones, and we have more frequency in floods. And it is evident the problem that we have in losing forests. So all these changes are generating important costs that this society in the several levels are facing, and we have to place more budgets for handling these disasters. The water pollution, the annual costs are almost $11,000 million. The power subsides in order to pump water is $600,000, and we have a cost because of disasters associated to climate that go for 10,000 million, and also we may see that there will be a decrease in the GDP, reducing between 3.5 and 4.2 in the year 2050. And in the case of Mexico City, we see how the weather and the climate change is affecting the number of illnesses that have some relation to water. And going back to the rural sector, we have affectation in productivity, in quality, amount, opportunity, the raping of every crop. We would have to pay attention to this. And also, we've got some problems and some aspects to be taken into account in terms of the practices in the productive system. The raw materials, pesticide, fertilizers should be used in different ways, because there are some areas where we have more incidence of plagues. In the summer, there are crop areas that are not being handled appropriately because the plagues could rise dramatically. I saw that in the northeast. The many summer crops have gone from the summer to winter in the case of corn, so it is more difficult to have the same practices we had in the past. So this has environmental consequences in our soils, for which engineering creates mechanisms in order to adapt agriculture, and we are trying to get financing from banks, but there will be regional impacts because there are areas that will be more appreciated than others. There would be variation in the appraisal of the land, and there are also variations in the cultivated area, and there will be a phenomenon in terms of migration, or we will get crops to places that are for the first time, and that would require people and labor to be brought. But basically, we are seeing very clearly change signals in terms of our crops. We see the quality affectations, and the topic of floods that has to do with the urban handling, the urban water handling, when the sewage collapse takes place. In here, we are comparing the activity in the region. In South America, we have a higher incidence of disasters because of droughts, and in Central America and the Caribbean, we have storms and hurricanes